Hey guys, welcome back to 23 Minutes with Gyalpo and Dawa.
Hi guys.
Hope you guys have enjoyed our last episode, and this episode we are going to discuss a very interesting books about political literatures, and it is one of the most spectacular books in the 20th century.
Yes.
And the author is also a very well-known author.
Yeah.
And guys, we're talking about none other than George Orwell.
Yes.
And because he is a well-known author for political literatures, political satires, and he has written plenty of books. But currently, today we are talking about, he has written two classic novels, right? 1984's and Animal Farm. But we are talking about the later one, the Animal Farm. And this was the book when he published in 1945, in the era of, the end of Second World War. So
Yeah. So guys, it's a very interesting piece of work, and most of readers are familiar with George Orwell.
Yeah.
But then during our research, we have found very interesting and intriguing facts about his life. The time period that he lived. Beginning from his very name, George Orwell. Yes. It was a pen name of his, and his actual name was Eric Blair. And another fact which actually intrigued me was that he was born in Bihar, in Champaran.
Exactly.
So when I came across that fact, I just couldn't connect these two facts: a literary giant and Champaran in Bihar.
Yeah.
But then it turned out that he was born to a man who was serving in British India.
Yeah.
As a civil servant, and after that, he graduated from Eton College in England, and then he went on joining British police, and his first deputation was in Burma.
Yeah.
So and I feel Dawa, George Orwell and his time of existence was destined, right?
Yeah.
To come out with such literature.
Yeah, and if you look at his writings, right, most of them are like political writings, and most of them are like encounters of his personal experience and observations in life. So, for example, right now we talk about him being like a serviceman in Imperial Indian Police in Burma, led him or inspired him to write the very first novel of his book known as Burmese State.
So Orwell actually lived in a very tumultuous time in our history, right? He was born in the early 20th century, and then at the very beginning of World War, or just after the World War, First World War, and he lived until 1954, when just after his completion of his work, 1984, and that period of time it is gruesome, almost, I would say, in the history of humanity, when we saw the largest world wars, first and two, and then the era of Cold War, right? So of course, George Orwell was born and brought up in this oppressive environment, particularly socially. He saw Imperial India, and as a young adult, he saw the oppression in Burma.
And also he witnesses Spanish Civil War, right?
Yes.
And that also kind of led him to write about the class struggles and inequalities, right? So Homage to Catalonia is one of the non-fictional books that he has, as a product of his experience in Spanish Civil War, right?
So George Orwell actually, I would say, he is an epitome of using fiction to express his feelings and his experience as a person, right?
Exactly.
And that's where the beauty of fiction is. You can employ this tool into expressing certain truths and certain facts in a different medium, right? And in Animal Farm, he employs allegory and symbolism, right? And his fable is about about a farm where there are a couple of animals being ruled by humans, of course, right? That is the norm we have even today. But he takes that situation into representing the Russian Revolution of 1917, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah?
So this book, right, Animal Farm. So this book was basically like, if you read, it talks about like animal living in farm, but then the interesting fact about this book is like the characteristics of this book, right, are parallel to humans. And also it talks about, because like it's very interesting because George Orwell like tells the stories, right, of human nature.
Yes.
Via animals. So I think no matter whether it's an animal or like a human being, but then being a social or a sentient being, everybody wants to live in a harmony and egalitarian society.
Yeah.
Right?
So
that's
yeah, I know. So the fable actually begins with a certain Mr. Jones, who is the overseer or the owner of the farm, and farm has all the animals as usual. The horses, the pigs, the sheep,
the hens,
chickens, and
dogs,
the
as a
ravens,
domestic
dogs,
animals,
and
right?
all, so all sort of animals, and he turns out to be a drunkard, and he kind of almost what shall I say, betrays his own responsibility as an owner, or and kind of exploits animals,
right? So that was the time, right? So animals realized that they shouldn't live under the rule of humans.
Yes. That is when they began to ideate this concept of animal rule, animal equality.
And then
and one guy called Old Major, in the story, he's a big old fat pig, and he gives his philosophy of animalism in one of the meetings in the barns, and he propounds this idea of self-rule, equality of all the animals, and doing away with the rules of humans, right? And that idea actually got seated that night, right? And
that was the time like they decided to call themselves as a like a battle of cowshed, right? Where they defeated Mr. Jones and they self-ruled themselves.
So
instead of calling a manor farm, right, which Mr. Jones used to call them, and they renamed as the animal farm, where every animals are equal and every animals have right for their own self-rule. So the doctrine of animalism was kind of fulfilled.
Yes.
But
so that was the the first thing, the turn in the story when the animal takes the charge. And then two prominent character comes into the picture. One is Napoleon, the villain pig, I would say, and Snowball, the good pig. So basically these two are leaders of the pack, and unlike our understanding, pigs in this fable are the smartest
and the intelligent one, and the one who makes the decisions, right?
Yes, the brain workers, that they used to call themselves.
They used to call themselves, right? Literally. And then there are also another characters who work as a propaganda machines of Napoleon, right?
Yes. So Snowball and Napoleon, they are opponents, of course, political and personal opponents, and they have a fight for the power. And Snowball's despite his intelligence, despite his being very conversant and eloquent, and with good intention, he somehow gets ousted from the farmhouse by Napoleon with his brute force, right? He was almost scared away from the farmhouse, right? And of course, then Napoleon comes into the picture, and he kind of consolidates the whole power through his a pack of dogs that he kind of trains himself. That was there, and also through propaganda that you were mentioning. So there's another character, very interesting character, I would say, and one of the most important characters is the squeaker, and he's again a pig, very intelligent, and he's very good with language, you know, and he employs language to distort facts, to change the truth and history, right?
Yeah. So if we look at this book, right, they have this when they form the animal farm, right? So with Napoleon and all, Snowball, they have established their own, rules and regulations, so-called the Seven Commandments, right? Yes. So where they say is like no animal will drink alcohol, all animals are equal, and there were like certain rules. But then with the help of propaganda, they amend the whole rules and in favor of themselves.
So what happens is, for example, on one instance, Napoleon, he takes to drinking, and Scholar went ahead and changed the commandment to no animal shall drink in excess. Yeah. So that in excess was added to the language.
Yeah. Right? Similarly, there are also they added that all animals are equal, but some are more than equal, right? Yeah. So they changed in favor of them. So the doctrine of animalism remains abstract, right? Even though the idea of old measure, so it was kind of misused by one particular pig or individual. Right?
So the Napoleon, who is holding the power, he uses his brute force as well as the propaganda, and completely changes the whole the idea of animalism as such. And the role of Squeaker in the tale is very interesting. And what he does is not overt but implicit and very subtle.
Yes.
That even the populace, the mass, doesn't realize what's really happening. Because of the play that Squirrel does with all those facts and play with the language that he does. So that's one very interesting character. And then of course we have Moses. So Moses was a raven. And that Moses actually symbolizes religion. And how Napoleon employs religion as to appease the already distressed and poor mass, right? So that's one raven. And
we have Benjamin, right? The political intellectual who knows everything, but then who doesn't act, right?
By the way, Benjamin is a donkey in the story. But please don't go with the normal notions. In the story, Benjamin is very intelligent. He can foresee the future. He can understand the intent of Napoleon and his the set of gangs. But then he chooses not to act or talk. And at the end of the story, he pays back for his inaction. The choice of not acting has a cost when he loses his very best friend in Benjamin, right? So Benjamin, guys, is a horse, a stallion, a boxer. Sorry, boxer is a horse. He is hardworking, slow-witted, very good with good intentions. He represents the mass, the German mass. And at the end, Benjamin, gets killed despite his hard work, right? Throughout the fable.
And it's also interesting, as we said earlier, right? The characters are parallel to the living body during that times, right? So the whole book is contextualized in the Russian Revolution in 1917, right? Similarly, the main characters old Major was signifies as Lenin and Marxists during that time, right? Marx during that time. And similarly, Benjamin and Benjamin was the regular political intellectual during that time. And then Napoleon.
Napoleon actually. So what happens is in 1917, this Nicholas Tsar, the second was ousted, right, from Russia by this proletariat class called Bolshevik revolution. So that is what is exactly symbolized in the fable, Dawa is mentioning. And the Napoleon, the dictator in the fable, is basically Stalin.
Joseph
Stalin. And then the opponent, the snowball, pig.
It's the Leonid Trotsky, right?
Leonid Trotsky,
who runs, Red Army liberation during that time.
Yes.
Yeah, he kind of in opposition to Stalin's, and then he get away.
So exactly, Trotsky was,
right?
Yeah, Trotsky was also exiled.
Yeah. Similarly, Snowball was exiled.
And then we have.
We have the Revan, the church,
the Russian
Catholic,
Orthodox Catholic Church, and how this guy Stalin used the religion to appease his population or populace.
And we also have these propaganda machines who makes snowballs as the real hero and make him into a insidious scapegoat.
Yes, and a big villain for the society.
Sure, exactly.
So that's how the fable is. I mean, it's very short in length, but then the real research, message is huge. The real, that's the beauty of fiction. That's what attracts me, when it could be very subtle and you won't even realize what story it told you, right? But then if you dig into the history of the era that the author is writing, or the personal experience of the author, that is when the whole picture of that book comes up. And for me, that's the fascination when I read a book. It's just not the story, it's the story behind the story, which made that story.
And also it's very interesting because even though it's a fable, right, it covers major themes that are still relevant in our society. Right?
I would say it's more relevant than
it's more relevant than ever, right? For example, it talks about themes like corruptions and then power struggles, like how the main character Napoleon and Snowball was struggling for power, and then once the Napoleon came into power and how he misuses power for his own interests, right?
So I mean, of course, as we discussed, the fable is in parallel with Russian Revolution, but then it holds true almost for all the revolutions across the history. And the commentary of George Orwell is basically about human nature. How we are so feeble as species to fall in the corruption traits of power. So when a person remains in that power seat for a very long period of time, the power tends to corrupt him. And that's I think it's true for, I mean,
and it's happening right now, right? If we see now, for example, in India or in US or in Central Europe, and for example, in Hungary also, across the street. So you see, if the person tends to, stay longer, then there are, greater chances of exploiting the power.
And the second thing, Dawa, second theme is ignorance of the mass.
Ignorance of the mass, exactly.
I would say, the power is directly related to the ignorance of the mass. If the mass is ignorant, then you're bound to have some idiot sitting, in the seat. So in the fable, except for the pigs and the dogs, other animals couldn't learn to read or write, and therefore they are not really knowledgeable, or they're not really aware of the situation around them. So they couldn't actually stop Napoleon when he was kind of consolidating his power and going against the commandments of animalism. Right?
Similarly, if we take this in examples or in considerations of today's era, like digital world, right? So we are fed with like such a missed information. Like the influx of information is such huge that we really cannot differentiate which one is the fake.
So
like
so you know
one, right?
this fable, we can take that from 1940s and just superimpose in today's a society. For example, Squeaker, he's the today's social media.
He is actually. So he's like a propaganda machine. So he was like the one who was giving the misinformation to everybody.
And Boxer, the horse, is us. So I mean, despite our education in terms of literacy, we can read, right? We can be fooled by technology, right?
Sure, exactly.
And that is what actually came in our last discussion, right? When technology, IT, and social engineering could hack us and manipulate us, right? Through all the means. And the revolution in animal farm started on the basis of democracy, right? When they began their revolution, it was about equality, it was about freedom, it was about self-rule, it was about rights. It was almost a liberal kind of society that they actually aimed for, right?
So in the name of liberation, it's like so for example, like when communist China, right, when Mao started his movement,
it's almost similar. Yes.
So in the name of liberation, they literally like make it into a like totalitarian regime. Right?
Yes. So the trend is same, and even in today's context, it is more relevant. Because at that point in time, the propaganda machine was limited. And it was more mechanistic, I would say. But now it's automatic. We have artificial intelligences
and machine
learning,
like tellers,
which could actually manipulate our whole life, right? So therefore, not only the factual knowledge, but also about being aware of ourselves, who we are, as we discussed in the last episode.
Right?
So that angle comes again into today's today's topic, right?
And now, since there are major themes, right, we cannot discuss the whole thing.
Sure.
So what I wanted to really focus on, like how relevant this book.
For Ladakh. So guys,
we're almost like
I know. Ladakh is no different from any other place. So we have same democratic system, okay, and we need to make our population or people more aware, not only in terms of literacy but also in terms of awareness, right? And we'll have to be very much alert by our so-called leaders in all the institutions, right? And we can't afford to have leaders for lifetimes, right?
That thing needs to change, right?
Yes. So the kind of reference we have, this is called personality politics, which is very much apparent in the whole world as of today. That needs to be challenged and to be taken with a I would say a pinch of salt. And doesn't matter who that person is, how good he is, what the son of a soil he is. We need to have a kind of change in power structure every now and then.
Exactly. So, and also like being a citizens or like being a so our duty should not limit with voting rights, right? So we should measure accountability at every stage. Otherwise, even though we live in a representative democracy, but then accountability at every different level should be there. Otherwise, there is a more chances of like exploitation of power, right?
So what the in the fable the possibility for Napoleon to govern was the ignorance of the mass.
Sure, exactly.
So it's both the ways. It cuts both the ways.
It's not only Napoleon who misses it. It's like the ignorance who cannot relate.
Who can't stand up for the oppression, right, or for themselves. So as a general public or as a commoner, right, you and I and any other commoner, we have to be very, very much vigilant.
Very much.
And we have to keep updating ourselves, right? So
exactly.
with discussions or reading or research. So yeah, I mean that actually onus falls on each individual. Yeah. So that's where today's Animal Farm is relevant to Ladakh.
I think so. And then obviously there are many takeaways,
Yes.
right? So like if you have any other takeaways beside ours, discussion, please make sure to leave comments,
Sure.
suggestions, and any feedback. And I think that's a wrap for today, because
Sure.
the book is such an amazing book, and everyone should give a rate.
Yes.
And if you like a thicker one, then go for 1984 as well, because
Man,
it's still
amazing.
relevant.
It's amazing.
Right?
So I mean, I'm biased towards fiction, and I got introduced to George Orwell through the title, this fascination with the title. And when I saw 1984 on a book, I said, "What the heck?" And why it is just 1984? And that's how I read 2 decades back, the book, and it opened up my eyes to the propaganda machine, the subtle propaganda machine that people can exploit for their own advantage. The very prominent, the very subtlest, and the most interesting was the language. How can language be used to manipulate society and the power structure, right? And later on, I read this Noam Chomsky's Understanding Power, and he demonstrates Orwellian, practices in real when he discusses foreign policy of US, and their verbiage towards its enemies and friends. So that's very relevant, and that's how.
And then there are many, we discussed few of interesting facts about him, right? And there are more, because last and we were talking about when we were having teas, how the timeline of publishing this book is so relevant, because can you say something?
I mean, Animal Farm, he wrote in between 1943 and 45, and at that point in time, world was fighting Second World War, and being a British or Brit, his publishers, didn't really accept it, his submission, and they suggested him to delay it, because Britain was siding Russia and US, all the Allied forces fighting against Axis, the group, Germans and Japan and all, and they thought by publishing such a satire on Russian communism, it will actually hamper the morale of allies. So you know what, guys? Just after the completion of the war, they came up with this Animal Farm in 1945. So that's how relevant the fiction, this story was back in time.
And also there are many adaptations to this book, right? There are movies, cartoons. And the first cartoon was published in 1954, right? And then you said, even though that was published, and so his motive was to make sure that such totalitarian regime should end it, but then it kind of turned away, and then during the beginning of Cold War they uses his book as a propaganda
against communism.
Against communism.
So the first movie which came in 1954, and it was curiously sponsored by CIA. So they used his fable, tweaked a couple of things in the ending, and made the movie. It is considered as a propaganda against communism back in time in the Cold War. So that's a wrap for today's talk. And guys, please go to the book. We would suggest it, of course. And if you have suggestions, comments, observations, I don't know, anything, advices, please feel free to write to us, right? And in the link below we have all the addresses and all the links to our other social media accounts. And until then, it's a wrap for.
And happy reading.
Okay, bye.
Bye.